Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me for episode 4 of Chronicles in Critiquing, where we're going to take a look at the third Mobile Suit Gundam compilation movie, Encounters in Space. If you haven't already, you can check out the last 2 videos I put up where we took a look at the first 2 compilation movies. I'm not going to go through over all the release dates and everything like that, but suffice to say this is the third and final one. It's kind of summarizing the last chunk of episodes. Just went up on Netflix a few days ago, so I thought there might be a bunch of people that are interested or watching it for the first time. I watched the Blu-ray version, but I'm sure that the Netflix version is pretty much exactly the same. The Netflix version is Japanese with English subs, which is what I watched as well. There's sort of like a long-lost English dub that I talk about in the last video, but I don't think that one's going to see the light of day. I got right here the Laserdisc version of it, which has apparently a different subtitle. This was a Japanese Laserdisc. I did not watch this Laserdisc. I've never watched this Laserdisc, but it's kind of a cool artwork, so I have it framed and hanging up on the wall. So I'm going to do kind of a quick summary, some highlights that I noted while watching the movie, some pros and cons, and then a little bit of like a final verdict. So when we left off in the second compilation movie, the White Base had returned to space and also learned that they were basically going to be a decoy to try to, kind of keep Zeon and specifically Char's forces occupied while the Federation took part in their various missions. So it starts off with the White Base going to Side 6, which is a neutral colony. So kind of a brief aside here, I was unclear to me how there was a neutral colony. They didn't really explain it because all the colonies are controlled by the Earth's government, except for the one that's rebelling against them. So it's weird that all the colonies aren't on the Federation side or, part of the Zeon. It just kind of bothered me. I don't think it really reflects super poorly about the movie. It was just sort of something that kind of threw me for a loop. Maybe somebody watching knows the answer. I'm sure it's been described in a novel or a manga or something like that. Fortunately or unfortunately, like everybody and their mother, or I guess in Amuro's case, everyone and their father, lives on Side 6. So Mirai, who is the kind of like pilot of the White Base, her fiance Cameron lives there, who's their attorney. Who's not the White Base's attorney, who's the colony's attorney, which is somehow relevant to the plot for some reason. Amuro's dad is for some reason on Side 6, and Amuro kind of reunites with him. Char is hanging out on Side 6, of course, as well as Lala Soon, who is this like super powerful new type, who Char has joining his forces. So some drama ensues as you could imagine. Mirai kind of breaks up with her fiance, and he escorts them out of the neutral territory where the Zeon forces are waiting to fight them. So they kind of have a skirmish, which the White Base kind of wins. Then the White Base passes the Texas colony. And I'll kind of get to this later when I talk about the cons. They don't really explain why they go check out this like abandoned colony. It seems like they probably have other better things to do, but they do. Naturally, Char is there waiting for him, for Amuro, that is, in his new shiny red Galgoog, which kind of sounds more like a meat on like an Italian sandwich than a Gundam. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. They sort of have these 2 little side stories. Then we get into the final portion of the movie, as well as kind of the end of the 1-year war with the Battle of Solomon and then the Battle of Abawa Q. At the end of the Battle of Solomon, we see the Big Zam shows up, which is Dozel Gabi's kind of big mobile armor, which he kind of uses to fight as a distraction so that his people can retreat. That's defeated. He dies. We do see his daughter and his wife escape. Maybe keep that in mind that there are some Zabi families who have survived at the end of the 1-year war. If you think that they all did die, do remember that there are a few lingering people still out there. After Solomon is taken over by the Earth Federation, Char launches an attack, and that's when Lala Soon sorties in the Elmeth. And they kind of have a battle where she has this really weird interaction with Amuro, and this is kind of the first like new type on new type battle that we see. They kind of have this conversation, this sort of out of body understanding of each other, which is again sort of what had been hinted at as the ability that new types have, which is to better understand other people. Lala decides to sacrifice herself to save Char, and she dies, which causes both Char and Amuro to be, kind of very upset and sort of increase the ferocity of their rivalry. And then finally, we have the final battle, Abawa Q, which is sort of the last stronghold of Zeon before their territory inside 3. At that point, the Federation, it's a pretty crazy space battle. It's pretty sweet. The Federation wins. Char kills Cassilia Zabi, who's kind of the last Zabi child. We also see Giran Zabi fires this kind of like Death Star laser thing that kills his dad, and then Cassilia kills Giran, and basically leads to all the Zabis dying, unless you kind of remember Giran's wife and his daughter Maneva escape. And most the body count isn't that high. In the second compilation movie, we had a lot of people dying. We have a lot of bad guys dying in this movie, but not really a lot of the good guys. I mean, I think pretty much everyone on the white base makes it out except for Slager Law, who dies in an earlier battle. But in the movies, he doesn't really get a lot of character development. He does get his kind of moment with Mirai, where she kind of confesses her love to him, and he gives her a ring and stuff like that. But I would say, all in all, not a huge body count for this one. So let's talk about kind of some of the highlights, some of the things that just sort of excited me about the movie. So there were unfortunately only 2 punches to the face in this movie. The other one we had kind of been keeping account, and both of them actually were from Slager Law. And one of them, when he meets Cameron, he takes his glasses off and kind of gives him a little flick, and then he later punches his fiance. So a little disappointing on that. Another, I guess, highlight or lowlight is they did, edit out Chalia Bull from the movie, who's kind of like a great character. So in the show, so Cassilia has this like new type core, and they're basically doing these like aptitude tests for all the Zeon soldiers to try to find like new types that they can give these like crazy mobile armors to. So Chalia Bull's like this like random officer guy, and they're like, oh hey, like you're a new type, and he's just like, no, he's like, I'm just kind of like a regular soldier. Like, no, it's cool. We're gonna give you this like crazy mobile armor, and you just like go take everyone out. And he's like, I don't think that's how it's gonna go down. They're like, no, it'll be fine. And then he goes out and he kills a few people, but then just basically gets like worked by the Gundam and then dies, which is exactly what he said was going to happen, which was unfortunate. Probably not necessary for this compilation movie, but it was always a character that really stuck out to me. And he does get there's a show called Gundam Evolve, which is sort of like a collection of maybe like 10-minute little shorts, and he sort of gets a alternate version of his story in one of the shorts, which I always found entertaining. So here's a few other things, maybe more highlights than things that were missing. I liked how they played with the expectations with Amuro's dad. So when Amuro runs into his dad's like, oh hey, it's so great that you're piloting the Gundam. I made this like super special module that you could use to upgrade the Gundam, remembering that Amuro's dad is one of the major scientists who created the Gundam. And Amuro's like, this is kind of just like a piece of junk. I think it's kind of cool. It's playing with this kind of Saturday morning cartoon idea where, oh, you're getting these like super secret modules from your dad, and that's how you're going to power up your Gundam. But they kind of flip that expectation up, and his dad is actually just like completely insane. They don't really explain it in the movie. They mention that he has like oxygen deprivation sickness or something like that. If you remember in the first one, he gets sort of sucked out of the colony, and for some period of time, he's unable to breathe, and that creates like some sort of like permanent brain damage. It's an issue that doesn't really come up much later on in Gundam. Maybe once or twice they mention it. And then unfortunately, Amuro's dad is so happy to watch Amuro winning in his mobile suit, and then he trips and falls down a flight of stairs and dies. So I guess maybe the body count is a little higher than I thought. I also thought Amuro was again kind of a big jerk to his dad, because his dad's like, oh cool, I'm so happy that you're fighting in this Gundam, and Amuro's like, oh well, you're crazy now, and I really don't want anything to do with you. And then not to say that his dad's like the best guy, because his dad did sort of ignore Amuro and his mom and cared more about the Gundam than anything else, but I still thought Amuro kind of did him dirty at the end there. Another thing that I thought was kind of funny was how inside when they get to neutral side 6, and then they're like, oh, we're sending our attorney out to come meet you, which is just sort of a weird way to like greet a group of people. And kind of speaking of Cameron, who is the district attorney of Side 6, Mirai kind of breaks up with him on the bridge of the ship, and literally everybody's there watching, and they don't even pretend to, like, not watch. And then after all of that, Bright's like, oh, hey, could you still help us escort us off of here? And, like, just so ballsy of him, which was just such a funny moment. The other thing is, I cannot believe that the Cameron guy survived this show. Sometimes you watch Gundam and you're like, okay, this guy is definitely going to die. And, he didn't die initially so basically he's escorting them out through the neutral territory so that the Zeon can't, shoot the white base. And I was like, okay, well, they're clearly just going to shoot and blow him up. And then they don't, and I was going to write it down in my notes. I was like, I'm not going to write it down yet because I still think he's not making it out of this battle alive. And at least in the movie version he did, which was amazing. Another great kind of Gundam moment that we got at the end of this one was when Char gets the Zeong, and he's like, well, it doesn't have any legs. And the engineer guy's like, oh, you don't need legs. They're not important. No one understands that. It's like, okay, so you're saying that every other Mobile Suit and Gundam in this entire universe just has these legs that are just completely for show. Which is funny. And I guess also part of the joke is that, Char has his, like, Char kick, which he obviously can't do, if his mobile suit doesn't have any legs. Another thing that I thought was really funny was when Char is killing Cassilia, and he has a rocket launcher, and he's outside of her ship, and he shoots at the bridge of the ship and literally blows her head clean off with a rocket launcher. I've never fired a rocket launcher. I don't know how they work, but that seems like some pretty crazy accuracy. So with all that in mind, I think you could probably get how I feel about the movie from those comments. I really enjoyed the movie. I think that Gundam, two great things about Gundam are awesome space battles and, just this sort of philosophical discussion of, how war affects people and the new type myth. And I feel like this movie was just a great combination of both. It had, some deaths, but for the most part, it had a pretty happy ending that I really enjoyed. Another big pro is it really expanded on the new type lore, and it kind of led to some of the debates of, like, the different uses of new types and how the military is, kind of using new types for their own, and Girin is basically using them as a tool of propaganda. So I thought that's really interesting, and that's something that will definitely be explored in Gundam going forward, and just the interaction between Lala and Amuro, and we start to really see the promise of the new type. And we do see a lot of people sort of awaken as new types in this movie. Char, Mirai, Sayla, even General Revel gets a little bit of a new type premonition where he's like, oh, my head's kind of hurting, but I don't think I have a headache. Obviously, he really died before that got explored anymore. There were, a few cons. And then this is nothing new if you've watched the last two videos, but the cuts do kind of make things a little awkward. I think one thing in particular was why they went into the Texas colony, because it didn't really make much sense in the movie. It's just sort of like, oh, let's go in here for some reason. In the show, Makave, who might remember from Operation Odessa, he's in the background of a few scenes of this movie. He sorties and tries to lure the white base and the Gundam into a trap, which is how they wind up in the Texas colony. They edited that part out of the movie, so they just kind of show up. And then the other thing that I thought the movie could have done better was done a better job of sort of explaining the geography of space. There's all these different colonies and all these different points, but they never really show us, like, a map. I thought it'd be cool if when they do some of the narration, if they showed a map and kind of showed where they were progressing and where they had been. I thought that would be a really big help just to give a little bit more context as to what's going on. But I think those are two pretty minor two pretty minor complaints. And again, if you're cutting down 10, 12, 13 episodes into a 2-hour movie, obviously there's going to be some cuts. I think cutting out Makave, it probably makes a lot of sense. So, it happens. So all in all, I would give this movie probably another, like, 9.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed this movie. I kind of thought rewatching these 3 movies was kind of going to be a little bit more of a bore fest, and I really enjoyed all of them. They held up really well. I do have more of an appreciation for sort of classic animation than I did probably the first time that I watched them. So do keep that in mind. It does have some nice hand-drawn animation. I think that the ships and the mobile suits look really cool. But, it is a 1979, hand-drawn animation. So, take that with a grain of salt. Thanks so much for checking out the video. As I said, please check out the other two videos where I review the other Mobile Suit Gundams. I will say one other thing, for people watching this on Netflix, put this down for a second. Netflix right now has Mobile Suit Gundam compilation movies 1, 2, and 3, and then they jump right to Char's Counterattack, and then Hathaway and Unicorn. If you can, I would really, really, really recommend watching Zeta Gundam before you watch Char's Counterattack. It'll definitely give that movie a lot more impact. Unfortunately, it's not streaming anywhere. There are Blu-rays available. Maybe there's somewhere else, on the internet where it could be obtained. But if possible, I would highly, highly recommend that you watch Zeta Gundam before Char's Counterattack. And then one other thing I just wanted to mention, I don't normally do a lot of anime reviews on this channel. I'm just doing some Gundam ones because they got released on Netflix. I normally do figure unboxings, so please make sure to check out those videos. This Wednesday, we're actually going to be doing the Metal Build Eva 01 test type. New videos go up every Wednesday, so please check out those other videos. Thanks for watching, and keep collecting.